Okay, when you're ready.
Today, by the age of 65, the average woman will have lost $431,000 due to the gender wage gap. This alarming statistic made me think about how women got into this position, which led me to my question, how have women's roles changed since the 1920s, and how can modern-day women's inequality be resolved? Women have always had a rocky relationship with men in the 20s. Many were often abused by men and were treated unfairly by their husbands. However, divorce was made much easier, so many did not have to deal with their abusive husbands, and as a result of this, divorce rates doubled during this time. As seen in this chart, the 1920s had a major spike in divorce rates, and much more people were getting divorced afterwards. Women also began to make their way into the workforce. During World War I, many men were off at war, and so the women had to take over the household finances and begin to work. When the men came back, women did not want to give up their jobs. This also sparked the women's interest in politics, some even getting elected to Congress. Although they didn't have as much political power as men, it was still a strong step in the right direction for women's equality. Jeanette Pickering Rankin was an American politician and women's rights advocate, and the first woman to hold federal office in the United States. She was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives as a Republican from Montana, and again in 1940, and she's pictured here. The 1920s is commonly referred to as the Roaring Twenties because the economy was booming at this time and many people were wealthy, and thus America became more of a consumer society at this time, causing the birth of the flappers. These women went against social norms and began to smoke, drink, party, etc. Things that were previously reserved for males, and they were often discriminated against and changed for. Today, women still continue to face oppression and discrimination from men. Women have been recently standing up to these men and fighting for equality between the two genders. Women have also spoken up about harassment that they have been endured by men. 81% can say that they have been sexually harassed by a man. And according to this chart, women have faced far more harassment than men. Today, women make up almost 50% of America's workforce, and even doing things men did, such as joining the military. Women also make their way into politics. Margaret Thatcher, for example, was a British Prime Minister and spoke in front of the United Nations General Assembly, whereas back in the 1920s, men would not have even considered listening to her. Hillary Clinton once said, "I have stayed home, baked cookies, and had teas. But what I decided to do was to fulfill my profession, and as I entered before my husband was in public life." Hillary chose to fill her profession and became a senator, secretary of state, and won the popular vote in the 2016 presidential election. Women are now seen in higher level management positions in many businesses. Although these positions are still male-dominated, in a speech by Sandy Tilliston said that too many senior managers, particularly CEOs, tend to pass jobs along to someone whose image is like themselves. This means that men who have ran these companies will continue so long as they follow this trend, which is keeping women from reaching their full potential at work. Women have also begun to become more interested in what was usually male-dominated. For example, Jane McGonigal was a video game designer and spoke in a TED Talk about video games, something unheard of only decades ago. However, even though women have come a long way since the 1920s, they still continue to face oppressive stereotypes, which has been a major spark in the feminist movement, where both men and women go to protest for women's equality, as you can see here in this picture. How do we begin to fix the issue of modern women's inequality? According to an article by the UN Deputy Director and Assistant Secretary General, Lakshmi Puri, moderated a panel discussion on countering gender discrimination and negative gender stereotypes, and stated that the phenomenon of gender stereotypes needs to be countered and fought in multiple areas. In language, vocabulary, laws, practices, mindsets of people, justice systems, media, and education. In different organizations and public authorities, in enterprises and individuals. And one of the solutions by the panel was for correct representation of women in media and a proactive role as media persons in changing perceptions. Another solution is to fix the wage gap between men and women, as tried to with the Paycheck Fairness Act presented to Congress but never passed. This would allow all men and women to be paid the same amount for that specific job. However, these solutions are limited in that media is always going to depict the story in a much different way than the truth. And if someone has had more work experience or more qualifications, it is unfair for that person to get paid less. In conclusion, women have come a long way since the 1920s and still have a long way to go with more and more women and even men standing up for what is right for women, and will soon be fully equal to men. Thank you.
All right. Let's look at a couple of questions. How did your research question evolve as you moved through the research process, and did your research go in a different direction than you planned?
Well, in the beginning, I wanted to do a completely different topic, and then I did another research project about women, and that interested me more. So it made me change my question into more of women's roles and how they changed over time.
Okay. And what might be the real-world implications or consequences of your findings, and then how would those implications affect your community?
Well, women make up half of the world's population, so, and many say that they have faced inequality. So by making them equal to men, it would make it better for women in society as a whole, and make it better overall for all women in society.
Okay, thank you.